Hi everyone, I'm Donovan with Serverless Solutions, and today we're kicking off our video series on Microsoft Copilot Studio. Now there's been a lot of buzz around generative AI, and it seems you can't go 3 LinkedIn posts without hearing how if you aren't already using generative AI, you're hopelessly behind, or that generative AI is the harbinger of our dystopian future, where all human creativity dies and life is pointless. Rather than a series of posts on AI divinations, as fun of a prompt as that might be, we wanted to see if we could apply generative AI to a real problem we're facing today. That problem is managing a recruiting process for a growing company. And we thought this would be a great opportunity to give Microsoft Copilot Studio a test drive and find where we could utilize generative AI within our existing processes. Now, we've already been working with technologies like Power Apps, Teams, Microsoft Lists, and more to help automate our process. But to be honest, there's a lot of room for improvement. So to that end, we've set up our own dummy tenant on Azure, and we're going to start working this process from ground zero and bringing you along for the journey so we can learn together about what's available, what's working, and where we're looking for improvements. Today, we're going to be focusing on Copilot Studio and getting it pointed at our documents so we can have a conversation about our data. I know that's where a lot of content like this ends, but this is going to be a continuous experiment and we have to start somewhere. Speaking of starting somewhere, let's get started with something fun, generating test data. So in order to get this test data kicked off, we're going to go ahead and use Copilot to help us make test data for our Copilot experiment. So it should be pretty fun. I've got a prompt here that I've already set up ahead of time, mainly because I'm super slow at typing and it would be super boring to watch me do that. So here we go. I'm going to tell Copilot that I need to generate mock resumes for job postings for positions detailed in future prompts. I'm going to tell it a little bit about my company. I'm going to tell it that I want batches of resumes and that I'm going to give it some qualifying information. So I'm going to give it a position, the title for the job, years of experience, and an optional skill set for a list of skills that I'd like to fill for the position. And we're going to ask Copilot if it can do that for us. All right, looks like Copilot is ready to help me out. So let's go ahead and give it our first prompt. All right, so I'm going to tell it I want the position of a junior cloud engineer. And we're going to go with years of experience, 0 to 3. I told you I wasn't going to make you watch me type, and here I am. And for skill set, let's go with at least 1 programming language, 1 database technology, and knowledge of at least 1 cloud provider. All right, so we are getting some folks here that we can work with. Yeah, let's just go with the first one. That seems fine. What I'm going to do is I'm going to ask it, can you flesh out Alice Johnson's resume so that it reads like an actual resume with a section for education and a section for work experience, along with her skills and any certifications she might already have. It should be formatted like a resume. And here we are with the formatted resume for Alice Johnson. We see we've got the summary, we've got the education, as well as some internship and past work experience all here. We'll go ahead and take this, and we can very simply just copy paste this into a Microsoft Word document and then upload it to our SharePoint document library, which is exactly what we're about to do. All right, so here we are with our document library. I've got a whole batch of junior cloud engineer resumes that I've generated with Copilot. I'm going to go ahead and add Alice Johnson to this list. Now that we've gone through and we've added Alice to our list of candidates in our junior cloud engineer resume document library, let's dig in how to get Copilot Studio to access these documents and ask some questions about them. Now, there is some documentation about how to do this, but it's a bit mid if you don't already speak Azure Italian. So let's go ahead and see how we can set up our connections so that Copilot Studio can talk to our SharePoint documents. As you can see, I've already created Admiral Akbar previous to this video, we'll create a new Copilot so that we can go through the whole process. So let's go ahead and get that started. So since we've got Admiral Akbar, I suppose we need Grand Moff Tarkin. It only makes sense at this point. We want it to speak English, and here we can give some Copilot some knowledge about who we are. So I'll simply paste in the URL for our website, and we'll go ahead and get started by creating our Copilot. All right, so here we are. Our Copilot has been provisioned. We're sitting here with Grand Moff Tarkin, and when the page loads up, we can already start a chat with Grand Moff Tarkin. So I can say, can you tell me about where Serverless Solutions is located? So we can already see that our Copilot understands our website. Obviously, you could point this at an internal website, and we're going to see what happens when we point it at SharePoint here pretty quick. All right, so we're going to head over to our Generative AI Settings. What we'll see is we already have our website here that we set up in the initial steps, and we see that we can add SharePoint sources. We'll go ahead and add our SharePoint site here in a moment and see what happens, and if there are some more steps we need to do. Spoiler alert, there's a few. You can also upload documents for your Copilot Studio to understand, so I could upload all my resumes here, but I don't really want to upload them in multiple places. It will be difficult to manage. You can set your content moderation for those answers that you're going to be getting. And there's some other options here. All right, now down here, we've got some AI features you can turn on for your Copilot. I'm going to turn on dynamic chaining. That kind of allows a more fluid experience going between topics. Probably won't get into that too much today, but it'll be useful for later. Now let's go back up here and look at our public websites and SharePoint sources. We'll go ahead and take our SharePoint website and see if we can just plug it directly in here without doing any extra work. So I'm going to try to give it access to the recruitment team because I only want this Copilot really looking at things that are specific to my team. This is really a recruitment bot. It's not an all-encompassing company bot. So I've added it there. Let's see if there's anything else we have to do. Can you tell me about Alice Johnson? I'm sorry, I can't help you with that. Interesting. So here's what's going on. We've added it as a source, but our Copilot doesn't have access to actually read that information because it's an internal site. So let's go ahead and start putting some of those pieces together so that our Copilot can talk to our internal SharePoint site. All right, so we're going to go down into settings and security. So we need to set up authentication to verify users' identity during a chat so they can access those documents they need to read. So we're going to have to actually do this manually because it's not only for Teams and Power Apps, but we're doing it for SharePoint as well. So we're going to require users to log in. This is our redirect URL. We're using Azure Active Directory v2, and we're going to need a client ID, client secret, all of these settings and scopes so that we can set this up. So what I'm going to do is copy this web redirect URL because we're going to use it in Azure's portal so that we can expose access via the Graph API to our SharePoint documents. Now, if you're not familiar with the Graph API, it's an API that Microsoft has that basically allows you to interact with different Microsoft technologies like Active Directory, SharePoint, and about 1 billion other things. So you don't really have to understand all of it or how it works. We're just going to go through how we authenticate with it. That being said, let's get started. So I've copied the URL there, and we're going to go over to Microsoft Azure, and we're going to create something called an app registration. And I can look at all app registrations. So we're going to create a new registration. So the first thing we do is we name our application. I'm calling it Grand Moff Tarkin Copilot. We're going to select a single tenant. For our redirect URL, we're going to use that URL we had earlier. And it's a web-based technology. So that was a redirect we got from our Copilot. And we're going to go ahead and register. And so now we've registered an application. So let's go ahead and get into API permissions. I'm going to grant admin consent. And now you'll see that we have some permissions. Now, if we go back over to here, we know at the very least we want profile and OpenID scopes. So if I add a permission, we're going to select Microsoft Graph. We're going to choose delegated permissions because once again, we're asking on behalf of the user, can you read these documents? OpenID and profile. Those are the two that we know we need, but we need some more, right? Because we're talking about SharePoint. So the other things I need to do is I need to be able to read files and sites within SharePoint. So I'm going to do files.read, and I should be able to find files.read.all. I'm going to need this. And the other access I'm going to need is sites.read. There we go. So I just had to clear it and then I could do it. So we're going to go ahead and add read all, and we're going to add all of those permissions. And as soon as that's ready, we should be able to take this information, bring it back into Copilot Studio, and have an authenticated request. So I'm going to go back here and I need a client ID, which is going to be my application or client ID. Copy that. It's going here. And I am going to need to remember those API permissions we just granted us was files.read all. Boop. We'll copy and paste that over. And we're going to also need sites read all. And the other thing we need is a client secret. So we can go over here to secrets and we'll create a new client secret. We'll call this Moff Tarkin's secret. And we'll go ahead and add that. And we need the value for that, not the ID, but the value. And that's going to go away forever. So make sure you save it somewhere. And we'll go ahead and save this. For the new authentication settings to take effect, we'll have to publish the Copilot. That's fine. And now we should be able to publish our Copilot. All right, so here we are. We've published our Copilot. So now we've got authentication set up. I apologize, I missed one of the recordings. Basically what happens is once you have that authentication set up and you start chatting with the bot, it will ask you to authenticate, and it will authenticate you against your SharePoint instance. You get a code, you put it back in the chat, the bot says you're good to go. So now that that's all been set up, let's see if we can have a conversation about our candidates with our bot who has now been given access to our SharePoint site. So I'm going to ask it, can you tell me about Alice Johnson's skills? So what it should do is reach out to SharePoint and give us an answer. Here we go. Alice Johnson is a motivated software engineer with a solid foundation in programming and database management. We've got actual references and a link to the doc that we can do. All right, so let's go ahead and see if we can ask something where I don't really know. So can you give me some resumes of recent college hires who know JavaScript? Let's see if it figures that out. Okay, so here we go. It's actually found some people who know JavaScript, Hannah Lee and Alice Johnson, which is great. And it gives us the actual text from those resumes and lets us know who they are. Let's do the same thing and ask for who know about MongoDB. There we go. We got Benjamin Rodriguez 3 times. He knows it so well that it's come back 3 times. So we can see that there's obviously some rooms for improvement here, but what we have is at least fairly promising to begin with. And so the question will be, can we iterate on this? Can we improve our experience? And can we tie in this generative AI technology with automated process flows so that we can actually move the candidates that we want to through the process? See more on that. You'll have to tune in next week.